All right. Well, this is a presentation for our January uh, Gallatin Gardeners Club presentation, and I am pleased to introduce today Elisa Boyd, who is the production control manager for the Towne's Harvest Garden. And Elisa is has just completed her fourth season, and she is an undergraduate and a master's graduate from Montana State University. And with that, Alicia, take it away.
Great, thank you so much, Pat. So yeah, and it's really kind of cool too because as an undergrad, I got one of the Gallatin Gardeners Club scholarships. So it's pretty cool that I have made it back to MSU, and I'm now part of Towne's Harvest Garden. So with that, I'd like to tell you all a little bit about what we do. So we are a small and diverse vegetable farm. We are certified organic. We grow on 3 acres, half of which is in production and the other half which is cover cropped. We are very thankful to have use of 5 high tunnels, and what makes us unique is our student involvement. So, as we all know, this has been a really crazy season with COVID-19. For us, we had a record number of CSA members. We typically have around 60 in the summer, and we had 83 members this summer, which was amazing. We moved our farm stand from campus. We used to be located by the Noodle, but we moved to the farm this year, which was really cool. And supplies were difficult to order, seeds were in short supply. Everything was just a little chaotic at the beginning of the season. There was uncertainty whether we would even be able to operate at all because classes shut down in the spring. But we were allowed to operate, and as we all know, ag is essential during these times, and I think all of us felt a renewed sense of purpose. So our student managers, we are really fortunate that we are affiliated with the university, and our main goal is to educate and work with students. So we have classes that interact with us at the farm, and our student managers come out of those classes. They typically have gone through the Towne's Harvest Garden Practicum, and they have an interest in staying and being employed by the farm. So these students are excellent achievers, they are leaders, they are peer mentors, and they are really a part of all of our management decisions. They have a lot of freedom, and they really have a lot of oversight about the decisions that we make on the farm, which is really awesome. So a little bit more about those courses. We are affiliated with the Sustainable Food and Bioenergy Systems program on campus. Between Mac Burgess and I, we teach the Sustainable Foods Practicum. It is a 12-week long, 11-hour-a-week hands-on farm experience. Students get to do a little bit of everything. They help plant, they help harvest, they help with CSA and farm stand. In a typical year, we would harvest veggies and cook them and eat them on the farm, which didn't happen this year, unfortunately. But that is something that typically happens. Some of these students have an interest in starting their own market farm. Some of them are just part of the Sustainable Foods program, and it is a requirement for them. So we also work with Marcy Gaston's Culinary Marketing Farm to Table course. These students are in the culinary department. They come to the farm, they harvest produce, and then they use those veggies to cook with. They host the President's Lunch, which again didn't happen this year, but typically does, where a bunch of administrative staff from the university come to the farm and experience a farm to table lunch, which is really cool. We work with the Montana Dietetic Internship Program. So these students are on their way to becoming registered dietitians, and they spend a 2-week rotation at the farm working with us, seeing how food is grown, which I think is a really unique part of their program and a really awesome experience because they get to see, how the foods that they're recommending people eat are actually come out of the ground and what it's like when they're truly fresh. So there are a few ways that we distribute our produce. We have a community supported agriculture program, or CSA share. This works like a weekly veggie subscription. Our members come to the farm on Wednesdays from 4 to 6 and they pick up a bag of produce of what's in season at the moment. It's typically $30 worth of veggies, and this year, because of COVID, we ended up bagging all of our shares, which was new for us. Typically, we've had a market style setup, but that worked fairly well and people were satisfied. I think with all of the food insecurity that we were experiencing in the spring when we were advertising our CSA, that led to an increased membership. So we had a record number of enrollment, and I'll talk about that when I talk about our different options. So because we live in Montana and our early season is mostly lettuce and spinach and greens, we break that first 6 weeks out, and it's a separate option because some people, they really want like the tomatoes and the cucumbers, and they don't want to eat rabbit food for the first 6 weeks. So we had 46 members sign up for that. We typically cap it at 30 because all of those greens come out of our high tunnels, which we managed, but it was a little stressful. We ended up there because we sold out, and before we could get campus IT to close that option off our website, we had sold 15 more shares. So yeah, and then our summer share begins at the beginning of July and runs through mid-October. And we typically have around 60 members. We had 83 this year, which, like I said, was a record number. And then there's also an option to purchase both the spring and the summer shares for a full share, which you get 21 weeks of produce, and it works out to be a $30 discount for buying all of the weeks together. We also offer a student summer share. This is a $75 discount, and we almost doubled the number of student members that we had this year, which was really exciting. So we also have a farm stand, and this historically has been on campus. There were several reasons that led us to move it to the farm. One, since a lot of faculty and staff were working from home and classes were canceled, there just wasn't a lot of traffic on campus. Also with the Romney Hall renovation, that road that goes by the Noodle is closed, which cuts down on our traffic. And then we just felt like we would have better control of flow through the farm stand and more room to breathe if we moved it to the horticulture farm barn. So we did that this year, and I think it was a great success. We were able to keep things very safe. We had a mask mandate before the state required it. We were able to really spread out. We had those doors open. We typically only had 1 or 2 people in the barn at a time. And then we went to a system where customers went through the line and pointed at what they wanted, and then only staff touched the produce. So there was a lot limited contact of the produce, which I think made everyone feel safer as well. So a little bit of adjustment, but I think we're really pleased with having it at the farm, and we're going to continue to do that. We also have a bulk sale, which is the last week of farm stand. And this is just to clear out the barn, get rid of, any like potatoes and onions and winter squash, anything that's left over. Things are discounted, and we had a record turnout for that. People were lined up down the road to come to our bulk sale, which was really surprised all of us. So yeah, hopefully we will continue to see similar amounts of interest next year. All right, we do a little bit of wholesale. We sell produce to the classes that we work with. So the Montana dietetic interns and the culinary programs will purchase veggies from us. In a normal season, we'll sell flower arrangements to some of the campus events. And then every year we have some students who are interested in, how restaurant co-op type transactions happen. So we'll have some students, sell cucumbers to Copper, or we had a student sell cherry tomatoes to the co-op. It just kind of depends on student interest for the year. Our community outreach project is a little mini farm stand for the Legion Villa, which is a low-income apartment complex here in Bozeman. Most of those members use senior food nutrition program vouchers, and we take those, and we also discount produce half price. This was a really interesting project given the season. Typically, we will go to Legion Villa and set up a market just for them. However, our customers at Legion Villa are all pretty high risk. They're older, they have health problems. So we didn't feel comfortable doing that. So we went to bagging and delivering orders, which was also really interesting because a lot of our customers don't have computers. So their program manager over there was really helpful, and she printed out orders. Every week we had a student put together a sheet of what was available, and then their coordinator distributed that to the residents, and then they got it back to us, and we filled the orders, and then we bagged them up in these bags and had contactless delivery, which their residents were really pleased with. It went pretty well. It was, I guess, the biggest thing that we love about Legion Villa is getting to interact with the residents and having, our students talk to this typically older group of people and getting to tell stories about, their experiences on the farm. And that was lacking this year, which hopefully next year we'll be able to return to our more interactive model. But we were able to get them produce, which we were happy about. So we also make a lot of donations. Every week, anything that's left in our cooler on Friday goes to the food bank. And this year we donated over 2,000 pounds of produce to the Gallatin Valley Food Bank. A lot of this are things like greens. So it's not all just onions and potatoes. So we're really pleased with that number. We also had a unique opportunity to donate CSA shares to the Bounty of the Bridgers Pantry. This is a food pantry that we have on campus. It serves MSU. And every week their coordinator would come to CSA distribution and pick up 3 bags, just like they would go to any other person. And they went to 3 individuals who came to the food bank that week, or to the pantry that week. That was really successful, and we're hoping to continue that on in the future. So a little bit about our budget. We really pride ourselves in hiring student employees, and all of the sales from our veggies essentially go towards paying our student employees. So this year, see if I can move your box, Pat. We did a little over $41,000 in CSA sales, which was a record for us. Farm stand in Legion Villa kind of is around $4,000 to $5,000, similar with wholesale. Part of our wholesale are preceptor fees for the dietetic interns. So that's not all just the sale of veggies. So we had an income around $51,000 this year. And then this is an estimate because not everything has gone through for our expenses, but we average around $30,000 to $35,000 in student employee wages. That's our biggest expense. And we pay all of those through the sale of our veggies. So we're really happy that we get to fund and employ at least 3 students all throughout the summer. We pay, some fees associated with the university's administration. We rent space from the horticulture farm, and we also rent tractor time from the horticulture farm. And, things like seed marketing and, new irrigation supplies as things break, kind of typical. We, we try to balance it every year. We're always plus or minus a little bit, but, we're happy that we're putting a little money in the bank this year. And that's kind of how a typical year works out for us. Oh no. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about our production details. So as I mentioned, we are 3 acres, And since we are an education farm, we try to exhibit many different scales of production, even though, we are kind of in this small, medium-sized farm. So we have a lot of hand tools. You'll see the earthway seeder. We do a lot of cultivation with hand tools. We keep this to beds that are, I would say 200 feet long or shorter. We have this Grillo walk-behind tractor, which is sort of like the main piece of equipment, a market-sized farm like us would be able to purchase and run, maybe 1 to 2 acres with. So we have that. We have a rototiller attachment and a power harrow attachment for that. We do things like prep seed beds, cultivate, and that's kind of like the BCS tiller. It's a similar piece of equipment. And then we also try to demonstrate slightly larger scale. We do have a John Deere tractor, which we rent from the horticulture farm. And for 3 acres, this really is not a piece of equipment a farm would have, but it's really cool that we have access to it and we get to show our students how it works. And, if they were to be on a larger farm, they might, get to use a piece of equipment like this. We have a lot of cultivation implements for it. And we also have this Jang seeder, which you see pictured. It singulates seeds. So that's really sweet. We do our carrots and beets with that. And it's also really cool because, if we have students who are looking to work on a farm or have their own farm, we can train them how to operate the tractor safely, which is something that, they can put on the resume. It's a skill for their future. And we really have the time, we do tractor safety training every spring. So I think that's a unique opportunity a lot of students get to have access to. All right, season extension. So we live in Bozeman, Montana, and I think we all know just how important season extension is for us. Mm-hmm. Our spring CSA, our first distribution, is the last week of May, which means we have to have things in the ground at the beginning of April, late March. And the only way we can do that is to have high tunnels. Because as you can see, there's snow on the ground when we're planting in our high tunnels. So we have 5 high tunnels. We also use row cover, both in and out of the high tunnels. In that bottom middle picture, you can see Lizzie is laying out these wire hoops, which we stretch the row cover over. It's a spun poly material, and it is indispensable. It warms up the soil, it protects our plants from the wind, it keeps the environment under there warmer, it protects them when we have hail, which fortunately we missed this year, but last year we were pretty devastated by a June hailstorm. And then we also use black plastic mulch. And this we lay on the ground with our tractor, and it's black, it's touching the soil, and it warms up the soil under there. This is great. We put all of our summer and winter squash onto the black plastic. And then our early plantings, we will also grow cover as well. And that really gets them an early start. So we can have, our summer squash earlier than we would normally. So we have lots of different scales of production at Towne's Harvest, and our irrigation kind of corresponds with that. In the high tunnels in the early spring, we typically hand water things. These are really dense plantings that we planted with the cedar, and we need good even coverage, and hand watering is the way to go. Once we transition to things like our pepper and tomato crops, we use drip irrigation. This helps to keep the leaves of our plants dry, which helps with foliar pathogens. It also helps cut down with weeding, since we're only watering the soil right around the plants. And then we've got a picture here of our plastic mulch layer, and that is also really cool because we have the ability to lay our drip lines under that plastic. So we have the drip irrigation touching the soil, and then we have that black plastic mulch over top of it. And that's great because it dramatically cuts down on weeding, And then the water doesn't evaporate as much since the black plastic is over top of it. And so, yeah, all of our winter and summer squash are planted on that drip irrigation. We also have some field, tomatillos, tomatoes, maybe eggplant that goes on that. And then the majority of our ground is watered with overhead irrigation. We have these 3 and 4 inch aluminum pipes with overhead sprinklers. And then we have 2 water sources that we have access to for that. So we have a well, and we run probably about half of our production off of the well. And then we also have access to surface water in that irrigation pond. And due to guidelines from the campus sanitarian, we only irrigate crops that are typically consumed cooked from that surface water pond source. And that's just, for food safety concerns. It's also a really great discussion to have with students about, the sustainability of using surface water versus groundwater. And that runs off a much larger pump than the well does. So there's just a lot of great comparisons we get to show our students. All right, pest management. So I would say we're pretty blessed in Bozeman because we have really cold, hard winters, and we really don't have the kinds of pathogens that warm, humid locations have. But with that being said, we do have occasional aphids. Typically, these are on our pepper and tomato plants. Flea beetles affect our brassica crops, so things like arugula, broccoli, cabbage, those types. We have cabbage moths, which also affect our brassicas. Deer, we have had issues with in the past, but with the installation of that really tall electric fence, we're really fortunate that that's not an issue anymore. And then as far as foliar pathogens, powdery mildew is one of the few that we do have, although we manage it pretty well. So we try to manage our pests with prevention first. Things like limiting overhead irrigation really help with foliar pathogens. We plant cover crops that bloom, that are habitat for beneficial insects. Just having diversity on the farm is good. We try to exclude pests with things like row cover. This works for flea beetles and cabbage moths. And then since we are certified organic, we do use some National Organic Program compliant pesticides. Pyganic is a broad spectrum knockdown insecticide, and we use this in a very limited capacity, typically in our high tunnels where we know we're not going to be spraying things like honeybees or, killing anything that we're not trying to kill. But we'll use this for flea beetles and for aphids in the high tunnels on occasion. And then we use dipel, which is the commercial name for BT, Bacillus thuringiensis, and we use a strain that affects cabbage moths. And it's very specific to cabbage moths. We use this to treat our broccoli and our cabbage. Really, any amount of cabbage moth damage is not acceptable to our customers. Seeing that frass and larval bits of cabbage moth is just not okay. So we do spray that. It's also nice, it's an opportunity for us to have discussions with our students about, organic doesn't just mean no pesticides. There are, pesticides that are available to us and, when is appropriate to use them. So it's good to have that conversation. All right, I think we all know a little bit about how bad the weeds are out at the horticulture farm. So we probably spend close to half of our employee labor managing weeds. And we have a wide range of tools available to us. From the hand scale, we have things like the scuffle hoe, and then you'll see Mac Burgess in the middle using this wheel hoe. That's by far my favorite tool. It's quick, you walk behind it, it's like a scuffle hoe, but you get to use both your arms and it's a lot more efficient. We really don't do any hand weeding, like on our knees, hands and knees pulling weeds. It's all about disturbing the soil and getting through and doing it as efficiently as possible. We also have some implements that we can run behind the tractor. So you'll see a row of potatoes, and then we're just disturbing the soil on either side of that hill of potatoes. So again, it's cool to get to show students what that would look like on a larger scale. All right, nutrients. So the soils out at the horticulture farm are generally very high in phosphorus and potassium, and we are limited in nitrogen. So there are a couple things that we do to manage this. So we are fairly small, and we end up intensively cropping our ground, especially in the high tunnels. Throughout the course of the season, we might have 3 different crops come out of a bed in a high tunnel. So it's extremely important that we're replacing the nitrogen, to keep those plants dark and healthy and leafy and green. So the 2 NOP compliant products we use are this Phytogrow Leafy Green Special and then Blood Meal. So we use these for the nitrogen. The Phytogrow is 7% nitrogen and the Blood Meal is 13% nitrogen. And that's quite low if you're used to seeing things like urea, which are 26%. But Blood Meal is our highest source of nitrogen that's available to us. And so we use that in the high tunnel. We use it on our crops like broccoli and cauliflower, things that are heavy nitrogen feeders. And we also get to teach our students how to do fertilizer calculations and figure out how much to put down. So that's a great experience. And then we also do make compost on the farm. This is mostly for improving organic matter in our soil. It does lend some nutrients as well, but we don't have the scale to really apply this as a fertilizer source. So it's more of a lesson in how to compost, and we pick a high tunnel a year really to apply our compost to. Sometimes we'll spread a small amount in the field, but that's mostly for the demonstration purposes and just a way to recycle, veggie refuse and weed refuse. All right. I would love to talk a little bit about some of our favorite or most interesting varieties. So in 2020, we planted a cherry tomato called Citrine, which Johnny suggested as a replacement or an improvement on Sun Gold, which I think anyone who's planted a tomato knows what a Sun Gold tomato is. They're these, orange, super sweet, amazing tasting cherry tomatoes. They're awesome. Our customers love them. Given a choice, people will always choose the Sun Gold tomatoes. So, and the variety Citrine was advertised as being more crack resistant, which I guess it's a bit of a problem in the Sun Golds, but really we haven't had too many issues with it. But we're always game to try something new. So we planted Citrine, and they were pretty good. There was a big size discrepancy. We got some tomatoes that were quite a bit larger than the Sun Golds, and then some that were really, really tiny. They didn't crack. The flavor was good. I don't know that any of our customers noticed that it was a different variety, but I think next year we'll probably be going back to Sun Gold. So it was an interesting experiment. They had slightly thicker skins, and I don't think they tasted quite as sweet, but they were still really good. And then we plant probably half a dozen varieties of slicing tomatoes every year. And this just kind of depends on what our students want to do. I think Purple Cherokee, Estiva, Striped German, Green Zebra, they're the green tomatoes with light yellow and light green stripes. Those are really popular with customers, which is interesting. They're still sweet and good. Yeah. And then the kale that we really lean on are the boar type kales. So winter boar and red boar. And these varieties are really cool because, they keep growing up, and by the end of the season, they look like these Dr. Seuss truffula trees. But we're able to harvest off of them every week for most of the season. And this is probably our highest grossing crop, just on a square footage basis, just because we harvest off of it every week, all season long. So its ability to produce consistently is quite amazing. And then they are not affected by the cabbage moths the way that the lacinato or the Toscano kale are. So that's also a huge advantage for us out in the field. We don't have to worry about cabbage moth damage on those guys. And then a few other really neat varieties that we plant in our high tunnels where square footage is, really important. We have 46 CSA members and we have to cram enough plants in there for everybody to get a cabbage. And so these mini varieties are really cool. So we plant the Minuet Chinese cabbage and the Tiara green cabbage, and they're smaller, and we can plant them closer together so we can get more plants in a bed. And then they're also nice because a lot of customers really don't want like a giant head of cabbage that's going to sit in their fridge for weeks. So these, they're still really nice sized, but they're a little bit, more approachable, I think, especially, for people who are new to the CSA and they might not know what to do with a giant head of cabbage. Something new for us this year were the Seagalane and the Alkindus lettuces. These are both butterhead lettuces, and they were just beautiful. They had this sort of red and green coloration, and they held up really well to washing. Some of the butterhead lettuces we've grown in the past bruise very easily and just look kind of damaged by the time they make it to CSA or farm stand. So those held up really well. Their flavor was great. That's definitely something we'll be planting again. And then we don't plant a ton of flowers, but we do always try to have sunflowers just because they're easy to harvest. It's simple for, someone at farm stand to buy just one stem and still, have a nice piece on their table. And we really love the Pro Cut series from Johnny's. They are pollenless, so we don't have problems with the pollen dropping on the tables and then insects crawling out of them. But as a side note, we do plant varieties that produce pollen for the beneficial insects, the honeybees and such out in the field. We just don't harvest them for farm stand. And then I want to talk about one of our cover crops. So about half of our acreage is planted in cover crops. We do this just for a lot of reasons, preventing soil erosion, adding nitrogen with some of the legume cover crops, just the biomass for carbon to still back in the soil. But one of our favorites is sandfoin. And if you've driven by the farm and seen that giant pink swath, that's what it is. And it's so beautiful. It's a lot like alfalfa. It's a perennial legume, so it adds nitrogen to our soil, has a really deep taproot, and it does a great job competing with our weeds. And the honeybees love it. All of the beneficial insects love it. It's something that you don't see as commonly, which is why I wanted to put a picture of it here. And yeah, so now when you drive by, you'll know what that is. I think it's really cool. Yeah, and with that, maybe Pat will post my email somewhere. And if anyone has questions, you can send questions my way. And I'm looking forward to seeing all of you guys next season. Thank you.
Well, Alicia, thank you so much. We really appreciate your coming to make this presentation for us.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And it's so terrific because, when we go to our garden, we go right by your garden and we see you folks in there working and, and it's great to get a little briefing on what it is that you're doing. If you don't,
Yeah.
I would like to ask you just a couple little questions.
Yeah, of course.
The first question I'd like to ask is, how do you choose the cultivars generally? Are you the person that picks them, or do you let the students participate in the choice? And
So yeah, our students participate, and I guess my general rule, I'm sort of the guiding hand in those decisions, but I always want to have, say we're going to plant 3 varieties of cabbage. I want one of them to be a tried and true variety because, we have to have something consistent and predictable for CSA. And then I love trying new varieties. So pretty much anything that's new in the Johnny's or the High Mowing catalog, we'll order and try.
Okay.
But yeah, so like at least one tried and true variety and at least one new variety for every crop. And then, probably two or three more different varieties depending on what the students are interested in.
Okay, another question that I had was you mentioned the use of dipel, which is a type of BT.
Yes.
And so do you find, well, first of all, how frequently do you apply the dipel?
So it washes off when you irrigate. So basically every time you irrigate, you have to reapply,
Okay,
which is definitely a drawback.
yeah,
So we end up doing it about once a week, just because we might irrigate more than once a week, but really just logistically, we're only able to apply once a week.
okay. And do you test your soil every year?
We do. We'll get a soil test. It's mostly for the learning outcome, just because we know we're going to have high phosphorus and
Right,
potassium.
right.
Those,
And the story is almost 100%. How much nitrogen do you need to add, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. I loved your little story about the sun gold tomatoes. When people ask me, when they say, "Hey, I can't figure out how to grow tomatoes here because the climate, the growing season's so short, and all I get are green tomatoes," I always tell people to grow those sun golds because I mean
So fast.
they come early, and
Mhm.
they're prolific, and
Yeah.
and you're right, they are delicious. So I was interested to hear about some of the other cultivars. We tried a Steva last year too, by the way.
It's good.
Yeah, it is. It's very tasty
Mhm.
tomato.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't have any other questions that I wanted to ask right now, but I will pass along to our club members how to contact you,
Okay.
and we look forward to seeing you. Why don't you
Yeah.
stop by sometime? We're usually there on Fridays. That's when we have our harvest, and we have some goodies after we're done. And you could
Nice.
you could drop by anytime.
Yeah, I will. Thank you.
Okay. Well, Alicia, thank you very much.
Thank you.